which captures the
she's heartbroken. Good evening. Welcome to the Milton Warrant Committee. It's March 20th, 2025. Karen, can you call the roll for us, please?
Sure. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Jay Fundling, Macy Lee, Peter Mon, Julian Maxwell is on Zoom, Brian McGuire, Aman Nagasi, and Ron Sia and Judy Steele are on Zoom. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. We have some of the things on the agenda that we've been on there for a little while, and we can certainly talk about them at some point this evening, if you'd like. But we have Milton Police Chief John King here to speak to us concerning the Milton Police Department and the upcoming fiscal 26 budget. So, Chief King, if you could come on up. It's great to have you here today. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Okay. So I guess I know Macy was part of the subcommittee to discuss with some matters with Chief King, and you know, we have a lot going on. We have an override that certainly will affect the police department. So I offered Chief King the microphone here just to kind of tell us about his budget requests, the department's budget requests coming up this year, and just obviously gives us some future insight into you know, needs of the department, you know, future concerns and other things, whether they be financial or otherwise. So,
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it.
yeah. So Chief King, table is yours, floor is yours.
In terms of the budget, it's pretty standard. You know, the staff is really all the same. Nothing's really changed. Expenses are pretty standard. There's some tweaking of some minor expenses, but nothing significant overall. Minimal increase. In terms of the police department, just the bigger picture is, you know, the major things going on. You know, we're a pretty low crime community in a good sense. You know, that's a positive thing. They do a good job. The town supports the police, and the police officers do a good job. But in terms of operating budget, like everybody in their personal lives, unfortunately, you know, inflation's increasing the costs. You know, 24-hour operation, like weird things you don't think of, like electric bills are jumping by like $5,000, you know, like a month. Like you got to understand all the equipment we have running, things like that. So, you know, that's just one example, but you know, inflation's triggering those things, not gas, which in the past has been an issue, meaning fuel for the vehicles, gas, but in terms of all our other expenses, that's really going up. In terms of the police department, like calls for service, things like that, the biggest trend really, I think I've said this, you know, last year too, is really mental health. It's, you know, sadly like off the charts. You know, substance use was trending up, and we got a pretty good control on that. We've done a good job on that, but the mental health calls have been incredibly high. You know, suicides, just people in mental health crisis, and we're dealing with that significantly. You know, that's probably the biggest increasing category. The other biggest increasing category is really like financial crimes, everything from, you know, washing checks that people are mailing to, you know, online hacking to credit card skimmers to you name it. So those are probably the two biggest uptrends. And then you always have your consistent stuff. You know, domestic violence is consistent, unfortunately. You know, probably the most common violent crime that we deal with, unfortunately. You know, traffic issues, things like that have pretty much stayed level. We see some declines in things, you know, car thefts have been declining, you know, house breaks have been declining. There's probably a lot of variables on that, in fairness, not just credit to the police, but, you know, more people work from home and things like that. I feel like that has reduced house breaks and stuff. I think some of the treatment and outreach and follow through that we do a lot better now versus 5 years ago with substance use and stuff has declined some of those property crimes and stuff like that. So those are positive things. Some of the behind the scenes, you know, police reform, it's a couple of years old now, but that's, you know, a constant variable in everything we do. You know, things like citizens complain, train and records are just far more cumbersome. They take a lot more time. They take a lot more staff. There's just a million, basically, regulations we have to follow. We'll also continue, and we've been working on for a period of time, gain accreditation for the police department through the Mass Police Accreditation Commission. That overlaps some police reform stuff, but it goes far beyond it. That's kind of the best practice standards in the state, and, you know, we're doing significant progress towards that. The most dire need on the internal operation things, there's a few needs, but the long term, not something, you know, before you today, but is IT, you know, we're a modern police department that has really no IT. You know, we had a part-time half person, and, you know, they transitioned to the town IT department, and that's never really been replaced. And I can the town's supportive in the sense if we need something, they send over an IT person. But, you know, I think it's crazy. We have a modern IT professional, even part-time, let alone full-time. You know what I mean? And that really has multiple roles. Like, you could use that person on investigative stuff. So many cases we deal now have to do with, you know, downloading cell phones and evidence and, you know, tracking people, you know, domestic, stalking people online, stuff like that. But outside the criminal, just operationally, like the software systems we have, you know, the town in the last couple of years invested $400,000 on a new CAD report management system for both the police and the fire. You know, that's centralized through us. We manage it. We had to do 30 years of data conversion. You know, doing that stuff when you have to wait for an IT person, you know, a month from now, or it's just not reality. You know, we had somebody we flew to New Jersey last week to help with that for 3 days. You know, we pay for that, but they're just things that can't wait. So that's a huge thing. It's used every day. It's used for every call for service that comes in, every prisoner that's booked, every piece of evidence or property that's recovered. And, you know, those are critical in the courts and stuff like that, that you're doing all these things the right way and have accurate records and, you know, safe protocols in place. So,
What are accessory dwellings?
That was a computer error.
oh, I'm sorry, I heard something. So that IT, there's just, you know, all the staffing's done through a police scheduling software. So we just, the modern world, you know, public records, everything is gone away from paper, gone to technology. At the same time, the police department went backwards and we've lost our technology people. So that's a critical thing, I think, long-term, not here today, but I do like to point that out. And then generally, it's really like the other two long-term things that are like staff-wise, I just like to put in people's mind is we have a full-time mental health clinician. We've been very fortunate. We invest a lot of time and energy getting that person here. They're very good. But these mental health calls are so extreme. I think long-term, we're going to have to consider even getting maybe another part-time person. You know, we have somebody, she works some days, some nights, but somebody to maybe offset some of those other hours. Like, in other words, we're funded 40 hours a week. We probably should really consider like 60 hours a week. So long-term, I think a mental health clinician, part-time is relevant. And then staffing, you know, we have staffing every time we get into, you know, beyond the numbers in the budget, you always have what to deploy with personnel. You have people out. I mean, you know, the past year I've had people out, breast cancer, heart attack, maternity. You don't have the number that the budget reflects. That's not the number of people actually working. So what tends to happen when you're short-staffed, you cut a program to move people, and we've done that over the last couple of years. We're short on patrol, kick somebody out of detectives, so now you're short on detectives. We're short on patrol, kick somebody out of community services. So those are people to do traffic or substance outreach and mental health follow-ups. So you're always trading one for the other, and ideally, you know, even the difference of a couple officers would allow those positions to be dedicated and not kind of bounced around. So that would be like the police staff. And then really not operationally budget, but there's some build-in needs in terms of capital items. Our booking room needs some serious, and cells need some serious work, and we have got some capital money for that. We're going to work on that. Same with our 911 room needs some major overhauls. We have some money for that through grants. And, you know, we've run out of space, which is kind of weird. We don't really have extra personnel. At the same time, I'm saying I need personnel. But the things we've done good at, getting a mental health clinician, getting a domestic violence advocate, we have no place to put these people. So that's really not an operational, but just a big picture item in terms of long-term needs. So other than that, the budget itself is really standard. It's very similar to last year's, which is a couple of minor adjustments in terms of the cost of items. But in terms of staff and everything, it's really the same.
Yeah, Macy, please.
So Chief King, you may recall that we met last October, and I remember you mentioning the dire need for an IT person. Can you elaborate what this person would do with regards to body cameras, traffic cameras, and the need to download that evidence onto your system? And would that IT person help with that?
Yeah, they'd be a huge help to the point, we've already got money. The capital committee allocated money for body cameras. That money has sat there probably close to 3 years now because we can't implement the program because we don't have an IP person. And it's not as simple as we need somebody temporarily to come in and, train people and give them those cameras. Once you have those cameras, court's going to want those records. Public records requests are going to come in. It's not just a criminal case where we arrest somebody. You're going to go to a domestic, and then 4 years later or 6 months later, that family's going through a divorce. We want, video of that domestic you went to, car accident, forget it, and obviously, like criminal charge and OUI, but you're gonna have civil litigators. We want copies of that body cameras. Redactions need to be made electronically. You gotta make sure the stuff's downloaded. You gotta fix any problems with that. So, that's just body cameras. That work would be extensive. So we have that money. We purposely don't spend it because we know it's going to be a failed program if we do that. We'll waste that money. So that's how critical that IT person is. And that's just on body cameras. I feel that on many softwares we have.
Follow-up question.
Oh, please do, and then could I
I'm
follow?
gonna end up direct examining him, but anyway.
Well,
I've been there before.
Yeah, I am too. So are you saying that the body cameras are not currently being used due to the lack of an IT person?
Correct.
Okay, so this equipment is sitting in a room after you've spent money, but you can't utilize it because you can't download whatever recordings.
Well, clarification, the money is sitting in an account. We didn't buy it
Okay, great.
because we don't have the IT person.
Okay.
As opposed to we bought them in this.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Because the technology would get old so quick.
That's right.
We don't want to buy
So
it.
you have not purchased any?
We have not, but the money is set aside for it.
Awesome.
Correct.
Okay. So Chief, can I ask you, just in terms of the body cameras, this is something obviously that you would want for the department, correct?
Yes, I want it, and the union's been receptive to it. Yes.
And the patrolmen and the women, I assume, would obviously, and I say this because I know when we were talking about the traffic circle, Randolph Ave and speed patrol, this would obviously be something that would
Yes.
not only protect the town, but protect the officers and protect the citizens.
Yeah, my conversations with the police officers and the union leaders, they're supportive of it. They're interested. They feel they're doing the right job, the right thing out there, and they want those videos. They want to protect themselves, unfortunately, from a false accusation or things like that. So they're supportive of it. And I do think there will be cost savings because we spend an enormous amount of time on internal affairs complaints and things that sometimes a body camera can save a lot of time. And I have already researched this and talked to my counterparts in neighboring police departments and chiefs that haven't, and they say that's one of the biggest benefits, that they end up finding themselves saving a ton of time and staff manpower on the administrative end when there is litigation or if, somebody alleges, use of force or something like that. So they find that it actually does save the town money long term.
I would believe that 100%. But I'm sorry, Macy.
No, not at all. So Chief King, did you also mention that there are traffic cameras around town? How's that data being handled right now?
So same thing, we have traffic cameras. We want to transition from one company to another company, and like the body cameras, we're doing it, but that was put on a back burner for probably over a year. I'd say 75% of the cameras in town were not functioning because we didn't have an IT person who could meet with the company daily and go through what needed to be done, which ones need to be upgraded, which ones could be repaired, where we wanted to, allocate these in terms of new areas and stuff like that. So similar to body cameras, the street cameras were basically not properly being utilized. We are rolling some out now, but it's been a 3-year process that probably could have been done in months. Because we do it when we have somebody.
Judy raised her hand.
Macy, I don't mean to take you off track, but I know you can hold the thought and come right after I ask my
I don't know, you're giving me a lot of credit, but go ahead.
Chief King, when you were talking about what seemed to me space in your building, if you were able to acquire staffing that's dedicated and not, doing 2 jobs for one, would you add on to the police station, do you think? Some sort of extra space?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. The building was built in 1972. It's in decent shape in the sense that I'm not looking for a new police station. I get reality, like that's not going to happen. Myself and Deputy Chief Mark Alba, we spent a good amount of time. We, talked to the Consolidated Facilities Director. We had an architect come out who donated their time to come out, kind of go through the building, explore different options. We talked to some modular building companies. They came out. We basically came up with a couple plans that was pretty affordable, meaning, hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to millions. But, I recognized what's going on in the town. I had some conversations with the town, but, we recognize the firehouses are being redone. There's talk of a school. The police might get pushed aside. So, the timing wasn't right. So basically we haven't proceeded on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Macy, do you?
So just another question following with the IT person. You had mentioned that you would want an IT person because it would help with investigative task. So for example, if you seize a cell phone now, who's extracting the information from that, since you don't have an IT person?
It depends on what type of crime. So if it's a serious crime like a homicide or something, we'll go through either the district attorney's office, state police, CPAC, or we also are members of a regional consortium. So in Norwood, at the Norwood Police Department, there's a Metrolec lab that can download phones, computers, things like that. The more serious cases we don't necessarily bring there, just because that's less staff, and if you need a quick turnaround or something. But those are really the two main sources we utilize currently. And we would still have to, I don't want to say an IT person would totally replace that, but if you have a serious case, it's okay. We had a shooting recently where a woman was shot, and within the last couple months, and we needed some very quick downloads of phones and some cameras. They weren't our cameras. They were like seized cameras from like people's houses, like, you know what I mean? Like on a search warrant. So, all different systems and stuff like that. They'll turn those over quick for us, and I know you're familiar with that. But when you have these technology cases where, all extremes, I don't want to say not serious, but these lower level, like sexting case out of the schools where, it could be a child porn, might not be a child porn situation. You're not going to get as quick of a turnover, so having somebody in-house with IT is far more beneficial for that. A lot of these things, like a restraining order violation, but it might have been done via Facebook. These things, like sometimes it helps, like we can download that phone. That's not going to get a priority at the lab. You know what I mean? Where it's not a violent crime. So that's kind of the balancing of those interests.
So when it comes to dealing with the operating cost, the issues as a result of inflation, has it gotten to the point that it's affecting you when it comes to cases where you might find yourself now prioritizing where you may not be able to deliver the most effective handling with individual cases if it's gone to that time?
No, I wouldn't say to that extreme. The inflation stuff's affected like expenses, but not to the point we've cut out or edited our priorities in terms of our caseload or what we would extend for that. I wouldn't say to that degree, no.
Oh, no, I'm scared. At least we just have time not to procrastinate on it.
Correct.
Go ahead, Jane.
Okay. Still on the subject of an IT person, I know that the town, not counting the schools, the town has 2 people in the IT department, which is not enough. And that's not, my understanding is that's not going to change with the override. So this is all hypothetical. But if hypothetically the town IT department added a couple people, to what extent would that be good enough? Because I'm thinking when we consolidate facilities across the town and the schools, that was to save money. I would think a consolidated IT department, not the schools, but a consolidated IT department that does what you need and also does things at town hall, does things at, the fire station, might be more cost effective than one person dedicated to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100% open to that. Have had that conversation with the town administrator. I'm not against it with two side comments I'll make. One is, that works, and I believe sincerely the town administrator said, like, if it was that situation, he would prioritize. If I said I need something on the police, he would make that a priority over, I don't want to say another department, but let's say
That's
the
fine.
cemetery had an issue and that computer could stay down for a day, he would prioritize police. Sincere, like, legit, but as long as, then that person wouldn't work for me, so that works good if you get that priority. Tomorrow there could be a new town administrator and, I want him doing this over here, do you end up losing him again? And then the only other caveat is, police software, there's some sensitive issues there. And, I don't want to say like, the person would have to pass security clearance, all that, but you'd really have to make that clear on, they work for the town, but you almost have to designate, like, say they had 5 people shuffling through. I don't know if you get 5 different people shuffling through the police station.
Okay.
We are probably more unique than, dealing with a computer at the DPW, the fire department, the council on aging. You're talking sensitive information related to cases, accessing the Lincoln computer systems that have people's criminal records and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I prefer it in-house, but I don't shut the door to that, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't want to break your flow.
No, that's not fun. Believe me, I'm used to it. There's no flow.
A couple of things. Before you got into having the mental health outline, and I appreciate you outlining that, it kind of came to my mind listening to some of the schools, right? Some of the pressures on the kids, social, peer pressure, et cetera, mental health issues, et cetera, and you can see how that's bubbling up. So I think it's great you're looking at figuring out how to get at least another half-time person, maybe full-time person, because for me too, I think about your team, right? They're seeing this firsthand, and then they got to go home and unpack it. So it's not easy for them either. So I think that's a big thing. I want to make sure you guys are all okay as well. It's important.
Appreciate that.
And because I just feel like I just want to figure out how we help you, because I'm looking at what you're doing. Your IT is so important to what you do. If you look at the rise of cybercrime, right, which is huge, having one dedicated resource, or at least multiple to your department, not sharing across, I think that having that dedicated resource is going to be helpful for you. I was thinking when you were running through the check washing, all the stuff they're going through, the scams that come in through text messages for pay your tolls, all these things that happen every single day. It's a real need. I would encourage you to ask for something like that, because I think you need it.
I agree.
Your team should continue to evolve forward, and if you look at the rise of AI, it is moving faster than any other development that we've seen ever. It's super fast, so that's a big thing. One last thing I had on there too was the traffic cam stuff. That's obviously a big deal for you as well, right? So if you're investigating an accident, you go to the cameras, there's no information. How long has that been down? Has that been for a while?
Various ones at various times, yeah, I'd say, and I'm ballparking, but I'd say years confidently, but I'd say roughly 3.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, they're critical. I'll give you a real life example. Within the last 3 months, a woman got killed crossing Reedsdale Road by a car. That person left. That person didn't stop. The camera, which is one of the ones we just recently got up working, at Library Corner.
Yeah.
Picked up the car. I mean, you have a dead woman in the street, and it's the camera at Library Corner that picked up the car just after the accident, leaving. I mean, that's a critical lead. You might never solve that case. I don't say you wouldn't, who knows what else the investigative lead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's how critical they are.
Yeah, and I think about the cameras down, if there's information like that down by where Brugger's is, right? That intersection, you'll run that light nonstop, so it's important. One last question I have for you too is, in hearing this with the fire department, right? How are you on staffing per shift? How are you down 1 person, 2 persons?
It varies. So it varies based on so many variables. So that's where I say like deployable personnel. When I came on, they commonly would run like 6 sector cars. I mean, now we tend to run 5, sometimes 4.
Yeah.
Like 6 is kind of rare. So it really, that's a tough question because we're slightly different than the fire, where the fire might say, we do 11, 24 hours a day, regardless of.
Yeah.
We don't do that, and we don't have the staff to do it. So what we say is, all right, look at our trends. All right, put 6 on this night, put 5 on this night. All right, we think we can get away with 4 this night to stay within our budget. You know what I mean?
I do.
So we're just a different variable in, where the fire's like, you don't know when the fire's coming, they kind of have their staff and what they feel. With the police we do try and work with, all right, what's our data say, where are these trends, what are the most likely times, when do we need more staff, less staff?
Gotcha.
And, you tie up some staff differently, like, days tend to be busy. Everybody has this image of like the nights. It's the days busier because a lot of these like non-priority reports come in during the day, People wake up, my car was broken into overnight, my identity was stolen. They might realize at midnight while they're sitting on the computer at home, they're gonna come at 8 in the morning and report it when they call the police. So you just get an influx weekdays, all the schools are open. But you're not just talking Milton Public, you got Curry College. I mean, that's a little different because people live there nice, but Milton Academy, so, Farmont, and you have private institutions. I mean, the hospital is extremely busy.
Oh, yeah.
Quincy closed, we saw an uptick. Connie closed, we saw an uptick. We're at the hospital almost every single day on calls for service.
Yeah.
It's that busy. And it's, some complex cases, what I mean? People attacking nurses, mental health issues, people with substance abuse, people who are there on the psych order escaping. We spend a lot of time there. So, those are tougher to predict, but we kind of just keep monitoring and tweak it. I mean, when, seasonally we change things, you know what I mean? It's just a constant reanalysis, to be honest with you.
Thanks, Chief. Sorry, Macy.
No, I just, I have another question. Switching gears here, no pun intended. How's your fleet of patrol cars? I think I read recently that you lost one. Was it?
Yeah, the snowstorm,
snowstorm, yeah.
First snowstorm,
That's right,
Friday night storm. I think it was like December 20th or whatever. Yeah, an officer going to a car accident. I think that was
Right, I
a
remember
like
reading
40
about
car accident. Going to a car accident, he slid off the road and hit a pole. But yeah, that car was totaled. So I mean,
Okay.
there's a lost vehicle. Our fault, not meaning this poor officer didn't do anything wrong. He was driving very slow with his license siren on going
But
to
it
a
happens,
service.
yeah.
But that was an extremely slick night. I think there was 40-something accidents just that
There
night.
were, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but our fault meaning we don't have another car that rear-ended us, so we can't go after their insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So those things happen. We've done pretty good in avoiding those, luckily. That one just happened, like I said, in December. The fleet, we're doing okay. The biggest problem with the fleet goes back to that inflation thing, like not affecting cases, but affecting that. The fleet, they've kind of kept the same amount in new equipment, and that used to always buy 4 cruisers. That same amount is only buying 3 cruisers. And it's not that the town cut the money back, in fairness to the town, it's just the price of the vehicles, the price of the light bars, the cages, the computers, everything that goes in it has just gone so high that you're buying 3 for what you used to buy 4. So over time, think of every 2 or 3 years, you go to 4, 4, 4, turning over, you're 3, 3, 3. So you get a 9 where you would have 12 in that period of time. That affects the wear and tear. It affects the maintenance, which, comes under a different budget. That's under DPW, central maintenance. But, we're one of the few vehicles too, the only ones, like the fire engines don't run 24 hours a day. Those police cruisers run 24 hours a day. So they just, even that idle time, it just beats them down. But, we're maintaining it. We're okay, but I know I pointed that out in the past. It's just that new equipment falling from 4 to 3 is not sustainable. And then you have like that cruiser was only a couple months old and got totaled. So there's just a loss, and it happens,
I know Julia had her hand raised online.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the budget here, Chief King, and I see the overtime line item as I'll round up to 660,000. Is there a reason that isn't broken out by individual staff members the way the other numbers are?
I just want to make sure I'm looking where you're looking.
I'm looking at the police department budget 10-224, and then I'm on Schedule D salary and wage tab, and then I'm on cell W127.
Okay, yep, I see it. That's Not broken out by employee like the other things because it can't be. You don't know who's going to get those overtimes. So in other words, we break out the wages for each employee on the prior tabs because we know like what their holiday pay is, what their education pay is, what their shift differential, what shift they're on, all, et cetera. That overtime, if you look above for like, say, in service for their training, that's required in service that they have to do so many hours of training, legal updates, CPR. They change the protocol every year, but basically the state comes out with, these are the courses every police officer in the state needs to take. That is kind of broken out. If you look, it will say lieutenants, 5 at this hourly rate equals this, $3,700. And then so many sergeants at this rate. That's broken out. When you get to court, backfill overtime, things like that, there's no way of knowing because you don't know who's going to work what overtime. We have some officers that work a ton of overtime voluntarily. We have some officers never take any overtime. And you have some that don't want overtime but get forced. So it's just an unpredictable. So what you have to do is do an estimate based on what you see for vacancies. You can roughly estimate some things. You can estimate, by how many vacation days people are allowed, how many, personal days, things like that. But like I said, you have somebody go out on maternity leave, you lose that person, you got to backfill them. Somebody has a heart attack, somebody has a medical condition, they go out for months, you're paying to backfill them, but every night it's a different person taking that overtime. So you could have a step 1 person, and I'm making up these numbers just quick, might be getting $35 an hour on overtime, but you could have a top step person might be getting $50 an hour on overtime. So it's impossible for me to break that out in advance.
Okay. So this is getting into my next question, and obviously that's a huge number. What is primarily driving that overtime budget number?
I mean, the itemized ones, if you see, like that in-service training, that's $178,000. That's just a state regulation. They have to attend those trainings back at the police academy every year. So, I mean, right there, you take away that 178. Court, pretty low, but it's unpredictable. That's really based on which cases go to court and which don't. I'm going to skip over backfill because that's probably more direct to your question. FLSA, that's the Fair Labor Standards Act. That is basically a labor law that requires us to pay people certain differentials beyond certain hours a week. It's kind of a complex formula. But the rest of that overtime is really just vacancies. So that's vacancies we know about, those things like vacation days and personal days, but it's those, unpredictable ones. Somebody gets injured, like somebody, takes FMLA for their personal life, they have a cancer surgery or, whatever. But that's what that is. It's basically replacing the people. Now, we don't replace everyone. Like if a detective calls in, they don't get replaced. If a school resource officer calls in, we don't backfill those on overtime. So those are really primary responders in a mock cruiser. Those are really the bulk of that. I don't want to say 100%, but that's probably 80% of that. The other 20% of that overtime is just, could be special events, could be people held over, like detectives for investigations, like the example I gave earlier, the woman shot that, I forget what day of the week, but that happened on a Thursday or Friday morning. They, those detectives were not like, come back Monday, like you got to work that case. They were here 16 hours, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I mean, you have that shooting, you might have a $30,000 overtime bill because of that. You can't reassign that to the next sector car that comes in. Same thing like the other night, we had a home invasion. Somebody had a gun. We got some leads pretty quick. They go looking for a person. They're out 24 hours a day. The detectives they were in Newton, they were in Boston. They find the person. They recover the car. They recovered a gun. They recovered a large amount of drugs. You got to kind of go with those cases at the time. So that's that other probably 20% of the overtime.
And as you have been filling some of the vacancies over the last few years, and you said, you're in a much better position staff-wise, has this number gone down with the increase in The hiring?
It has, if you look at probably each of the prior years, we underspent that account, so that money was given back to the town general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Question, Schedule B and C, I don't know if you, I have a couple questions. It looks like it's other available funds. On the budget, on the town website, I don't know if these dates are right, 6/20, 6/23, 6/24, or is that current? This looks like it's funds that you have, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Do you know, well, these are money you have to spend, correct?
Correct.
Well, first question is the dates, are they accurate? Like 6/30/24, or is that?
Yeah, so that's the amount as of that date. That's the way we're required to enter it, so that might not be the amount today.
Okay, right. And I guess the other question is, this is money you're gonna spend, and I guess, how are you spending it? Like, there's a big amount here, like the 691 and,
So those are all earmarked, so like this money really isn't like town money, these are from like other sources. So that like 911 support grant, so like I'm required to do certain 911, so that, I mentioned earlier, like one of the building projects. We have to redo our whole like 911 building. So like I've already got some costs, like the terminals alone, I think at 325,000, just for the stations, but there's gonna be more to that. So the state's giving us that money, but they're saying you have to spend it on this. So that has to be spent on 911, it can't be spent on anything else. But the state's basically gonna pay for that instead of the town. And then similar things like bulletproof vests, you know, really any of these, I have to spend that on bulletproof vests. They expire after every 5 years, but the state, we do paperwork, verify we did it, get the receipts, turn it in, but long story short. So I
is this
just,
all money is, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is this all money you're spending this year?
yes, but I don't want to say necessarily would get spent this year because it could carry over because they're a revolving account. So if something doesn't get done,
Okay.
it could carry to the next year. And some of them are always fluid, like say, the police deer grant, like we run a deer camp, like that shows 1,300. That at some point goes up, you know, the Copeland Foundation is very generous, has always funded that summer camp for kids. They'll make donations and that will go up to like 40,000. But then summer will come and in that camp ends, it will fall back down to like 1,000. So these are a bit fluid. Same with the 911, they could say like, oh, every officer has to go to, you know, these 2 days of training, and you could have a $50,000 drop. So it's just not necessarily time, like I don't want to limit it to that budget. The reason they're revolving is because this, you could do something in May, but you might get funded in October, so it could be 2 different years. And that pretty much all these are kind of like weird accounts like that. That traffic enforcement, that's an earmark specifically for 2 roads, Route 28 and Route 138 from the state. So they're all kind of
Which one was that, I'm sorry?
Line 18.
traffic
Oh,
enforcement.
okay, so,
So all of these, like the gift account, that's money that people have donated for certain things. So I'll give you like an example, like Milton Academy will give us $10,000 and say donate it. So like we use that to like do like National Night Out. So they're all basically firearms is for firearms licensing, things like that. So they're all just different bullet kind of earmarks that are available money, but I say available meaning I have to do certain things with them.
okay. What is the federal click-it grant?
Yeah, it's like a traffic, like it's changed names, the state now calls it MRS, but when we did the grant, it was called Click It or Ticket. So it started when they first started, like past the seatbelt law, but the state will come out at certain time periods during the year, so that money's in there, they'll say, it's kind of vague, but it's really like a traffic grant. So they might say, all right, spring's coming, more people are driving. So the reason for Click It or Ticket was like you'd see on those billboards, Click It or Ticket, go out and write tickets for seatbelt violations. During the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, they'll say, put out a card designated to OUI patrol. So rather than the town paying for that, it's paid for out of those. But that's basically same thing, it's state money that the feds give it to the state gives it to us, and then they have criteria, you have to spend it between these dates and focus on these type of violations.
Now, Chief King, I have a question about the animal shelter, which falls under your purview. There's, I believe there's a new animal shelter building now, right?
There is.
Okay, does that increase any costs because it's larger, it's
Yeah,
bigger than this little
we
building?
expected to, but it's a little bit of the unknown, and, you know, this was, I had some meetings with like the planning department and stuff like that when they did this and kind of cautioned that, but I won't have a specific answer for you, unfortunately. I wasn't hugely involved in it as much as it comes under me. But we did point out to expect some increased costs. I don't think they're gonna be huge, but like electricity, things like that. I mean, that poor woman was working in a shack currently, and it had minimal expenses. I mean, the facility was just terrible, you know what I mean? It didn't cost a lot to operate, you know. I don't see a growth, even though it's bigger, in care, meaning, you know, we pay for food and vaccinations and things like that. So I think those will probably stay steady, but I do picture maybe some like electrical type expenses. But I don't think it's gonna be huge. That's the only one we really flagged as a potential.
Is there anything you want to add about MEMA? Because that's part of your budget as well.
No, that's another one comes under me. I mean, that's pretty standard. You know, the town, like every community, has a local emergency planning committee that operates kind of under like the state MEMA, and, you know, they have meetings. They have a meeting later this month, and, you know, it's basically for these things you hope never happen, but you got to be prepared for it, from severe snowstorms, hurricanes, you know, major incidents that affect us as a community, and it's made up of, it comes under me, but, you know, there's a high-ranking fire official, there's somebody from the hospital, Board of Health, the schools. We basically, you know, have plans in place for emergency shelters, emergency generators, to basically, you know, deal with any type of emergency like you see on the news throughout the country. So there's a lot of planning, there's some grants involved in that pays for some stuff. So that budget's really minimal, you know, it's a few $1,000s. And a lot of times that money's, I don't say not spent, but it's underspent. You know, they have like an emergency trailer, they have cots, they have generators, they have things, but most of that ends up whatever you spend. There's a lot of times the state and the feds have matching grants, so you get like an equal amount back.
Because I noticed there's no increase from.
No, we don't increase it. It maintains itself. It's manageable, to be honest with you. I don't see a need to increase it. And there's just some great volunteers and people that do a lot with that. You know, these we call it the auxiliary police. They really don't exist anymore because of police reform. You can't use that title police for them without full police powers type of thing. So, but they still work as like traffic control officers, you know, the auxiliary fire. People don't see these people a lot, but they really volunteer, spend a lot of time. They come out in the middle of the night when people don't realize it, set up, you know, light-in stations and, you know, equipment for emergency first responders. So they're just a great resource, and they do it for really small money.
Chief, can you talk about your personnel? And I know we just had some conversations, and I think just in terms of like civil service and replacement officers, how are you looking in that domain?
Yeah, we're probably the best we've ever been in the sense of we have struggled. Since I've been
Yeah, well,
chief, we never got like to the staffing we need to be. And, you know, a lot changed during COVID, George Floyd, police reform. It's just our applicant pool has really dropped. We're seeing it with sworn officers, we're seeing it with dispatchers, we're seeing it in our cadet program, and it's not just us. It's everywhere. Like, I talked to chiefs everywhere. They've all seen a decline. So the issues we struggled with, and we're getting to a good point, but we were struggling to get people, and then we would get people, and 62% we were averaging were failing out. And not failing out due to like us saying, oh, we don't think you're fit, or a background investigation. Just, they would go to the academy and they'd fail the physical. Or you send them for a medical, they'd fail the medical. Like things that were independent of us, and they're like, nope, they're not allowed in the academy. And you'd go back and start from scratch again. And, you know, meanwhile, you're running short, other people being forced to work. So we've struggled with that. We have got pretty good. We have 2 vacant in this budget when this budget was prepared, but we have 2 scheduled for academies. That's in April, which would fill those. So that would be the first time, I became chief in 2016, that would be the first time we got back to full staffing. And
Great.
my career. And that's not, actually, that's just getting back to where we were supposed to be all that time. So we've really struggled. And it's just, some is generational, I think there's just less interest in becoming a police officer today. And we struggle with that. It's become more competitive, so these other communities now are raising the salaries, raising the benefits to get those people. So, you end up in that, like, we really haven't lost people to other departments, but, we lose people through just retirements and things like that, and we just had trouble replacing them. Losing more than half that we hired, that's a very extremely high number. That's just you invest a lot, the background investigations, medicals, drug testing, you spend a lot of money. You have to go in a certain order. You can't just be like, well, I'm gonna change the order till we, if I think that person's gonna fail a run, I'll do that first. You can't even send them that run till they've done a medical, till they've done a drug test. They won't allow them to take the run. You gotta do the background, because you gotta make them a conditional offer of employment. So you spend a lot of time and money just to lose those recruits. But we're getting good. The people there are, good. We have a good group of employees. I feel like we're doing good staffing-wise, but we are seeing that with all levels, sworn and civilian. Really, the dispatchers and cadets, it's the same problem.
Yeah, how's the cadet numbers? I know they used to be a pretty popular position.
I think when I took the test, 60 people took it. The last time we gave that test, one person signed up. It's drastic, and we're always losing people. I lost, within this month alone, I lost a girl who went to work as an administrative job in the pediatric office just because it was Monday to Friday days versus nights and weekends. I lost a girl who got on transit police to be a police officer. And I'm losing another girl who's just, the same thing. I come in, I get forced to work an extra shift because I'm, and I don't want to, I can't plan my life. So we've lost 3 in a month. It's just a constant, struggle. But, you deal with it because you have to. But, it's that recruiting, and it's a combination of variables. That's why it's so hard to deal with. So.
Yeah, I just remember you talking about just the issues with the academy, and I get others going to other agencies, state police,
right,
and otherwise because of the salary and the
sure,
benefits. And it makes sense. I understand that. I was just curious if you were able to kind of get the ship is kind of coming
like I
back
said,
a
I'd say
little
it's the
bit.
best we've had. You know what I mean? Which is good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But hopefully we can maintain that too.
Well, that's the thing,
Yeah.
right? Maintaining everybody here. I would like to speak to your IT concerns because I know from just personal professional experience how much police investigations and prosecutions, how they've changed in the past 10 years and especially 5 years, and the reliance on digital evidence, the expectations of the courts, the jurors, the public, they're expecting a nice 50-minute CSI episode, where the crime is solved, pulling all these digital resources. So, and I know that that's really the way everything is going. And, to look at some departments, I look at Quincy, for example, a lot of money there, and I know they have some struggles sometimes.
Yeah.
So, I can say from my professional experience that, I think that is a huge concern of yours. You brought it forward, and something that as a citizen of the town, I'm concerned about,
Thank you.
Peter.
Chief, what do you think an IT person would cost?
We listed it for 90, and that was based on surveying other police departments. And that's where we came up with that number as a ballpark. We even considered, do we make an officer one, and stuff like that. The pro and con to that is, you're gonna lose the officer. So in other words, if the town never gives it, I have thought this, I might be forced to do something like that, but now you've lost that officer from another spot, so how's that gonna cost you and affect operations? And then the only risk with that is you gotta train that person up from scratch. Somebody went into an IT field, they went to be a police officer. Mm-hmm. And what if they get promoted and now go to a different shift, a different assignment? You gotta stay within kind of those union regulations too. So it just got some, I wouldn't say it couldn't be done, but it's a little riskier than a designated civilian IT person.
I can understand, especially as a recovering IT guy.
Macy?
You guys can always do like some colleague with benefits though, maybe like train some.
I have a follow-up question. Have you, and if you can't speak to this for confidentiality or it's under investigation, have you encountered a situation where, for example, body cams, that you needed the digital evidence, but you didn't have to, but you lost the case, or you couldn't indict it for that reason,
For not having it?
for lack of evidence? When you could have had it if you had the body cam in use, and with an IT person to be able to download that data and then provide it as discovery, where you just didn't have the body cam and you wish you had it.
Yeah, I don't know if I could pinpoint a case where we lost because of that, because, if you never had it, like, it's a little different on
Well, not maybe,
discovery than,
maybe not pinpoint it, but
Had
that
it
you
and
could have
lost it.
bolstered the case if you had.
Oh, I think there's many of those cases, to be honest with you, yeah. I think generally, that's a lot of times, I think that both on some, like, criminal cases, and I think on, you think any given case, I know there's two sides to every story, in fairness to the defense too, the police say this, the defense say this, like, I think a video of that's invaluable, and, there's a lot of, we still spend a lot of time researching cameras and their effectiveness and their flaws, and, I sent people, the Norfolk DAs was involved, like, down to, Mohegan Sun for, an annual summit every October, and, they talk about how what speed does your brain process things at versus what speed does the camera process things at. Like, you learn a lot, and I guess by us being late, you learn a lot from other departments, what they've experienced, good and bad. So I do think there's cases where it would have helped us to have it, where it becomes like, he says this person says this, and, it would have been proof. You know what I mean?
And then, can I follow up on that? Just, conversely, with this, especially during COVID, with horrible allegations and some substantiated police misconduct, do you find that having body cams is a deterrent for the police officer and also the protection for the officer as well?
Definitely on both of those. Yeah, I feel like it's a deterrent. Like, if an officer knows he's got a camera on him, more likely to, forget the obvious use force and stuff. But I think even your conduct, your courtesy and stuff is going to be different. You're going to be more courteous. You're not going to swear or say something inappropriate. So yeah, I think it's a good control mechanism. And I just want to be careful. I'm not saying like all those police need that.
No, of course not. And I'm not.
I think that
Yeah, I'm
the majority
not.
of the time they're out doing the right thing.
Right,
But
of course.
yeah, I do think inherently, I think all of us, like if you know you're on camera, you can act a little better probably. Like I think that's human nature. You know what I mean? Whether you're a kid or an adult. So I do think it would be good on that. And I do think, like I said, I've talked to the departments that have it, and they're like, we'll get these complaints, and then sometimes we'll be like, all right, well, come in, we want to show you the body camera. And then of course, like, I withdraw my complaint. You know what I mean? Like, if the complaint is completely different than what that body camera showed. You know what I mean? And we deal with posts all the time. We were dealing with posts this week on something. And one of the first things they always say is like, send us the body camera. And it's like, we don't have any. They're like, oh, you don't? Like, you're one of those departments. It's like almost a stigma with it. Like, and there's not a reason not to have it. Like, you don't want to look like you're the department that's hiding something. You know what I mean?
Right. So it's crucial with the
think
IT
it is,
person.
yeah.
It's the top priority.
I think it's changed the dynamic of casework prosecution for police departments. I think it really has. I think judges would say the same thing, that it's just changed the dynamic. Everyone wanted a video until you got one, right?
Yeah. With what you said earlier about like the jury expects this cookie cutter like CSI case, I think you look at most of the country, they have body cameras. So I think these jurors want that, or expect that, and then when they don't have it, they wonder why don't you have it?
Right, and then there's this cloud of suspicion of why don't you have body cameras?
Right.
So you should be transparent and have body cameras and have an IT person to be able to handle the data
Exactly.
that you gather from it.
And when you sit on a serious case, they don't hear like, you don't have one IT person? Like, it just sounds laughable. Like, really? You're here on a murder case? Like, it does sound pathetic in a sense,
Yeah, and there's no, and you said earlier, there's no union concerns at all. I wouldn't expect them
No,
to
they've been
be.
very good. No, they've been
okay.
very good in fairness to them, yeah.
No, I think every police department, the largest ones, all have body cams at this point.
Yeah, but also like the need for the other
Yes.
pieces,
Sure.
handling
Yeah.
those are 30-year public records.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's another, you had cited that just the production of the public record.
And when that public record, if you look at that, like, a lot of people don't realize, that public record law started, like, when the town did like a check at one point after the public records, like, 89% of those requests for the town came to the police department. 11% was every other department in town.
Wow.
Yep.
Like, that's drastic. Like, they're all coming to the police. You know what I mean? And it's just, some are real, like I said, litigation, criminal cases, civil cases, but just the nature we do, you just get these things where you get these investigative groups, universities. I want, every arrest, for the last, 5 years, or I want every time you used, pepper spray for the last 6 years, or I want, every record of every certain type of incident. Like, we just get crushed with these requests.
And you have a time constraint to respond to those.
Right.
You have to, it's
So now
pretty
imagine
immediate.
that, dealing with it not just in paper, but digitally, you know what I mean? And then, you got a juvenile in the background, you got to redact out of it, or somebody's privacy interests, like, you might have footage here, but, you have a poor innocent man in the background, you want to redact out, and so you need somebody who can do that and spend the time doing that stuff.
So I don't know if no one has any more questions about the body cam. I was just curious, and this is just kind of part of our general conversations, and we're talking about an override this year, putting an override forward. That's going to happen, and the conversation here at the committee and other committees has been, next year, the year after, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. Like, what are we going to do? Where obviously the budget issues we're not going to solve. I mean, more money is an issue, but I was just curious because it's come up here randomly in some meetings, and we are expanding. We are right now. I mean, we're expanding our population base. I mean, we got the ice house, the 40B projects that we have going on. Obviously, we're moving towards MBTA. And this is kind of a big question, but do you have any concerns? Do you have any insight onto this expanse of the population, or expanse of vehicles, or whatever within the town in your department, and how you can address that? Is that a problem that you're looking at now? Is that something that there's concerns, or is it just kind of see how it goes and react accordingly?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word problem or concern. In general, whenever you have growth, population growth, business growth, it's going to impact, the police department in terms of more calls for service generally. It's hard to predict. I don't think all growth is bad. So,
it's truly, yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't necessarily it's different impacts. You build commercial, maybe it impacts the police, but doesn't impact the schools. Like, I just kind of think of a lot of things like common sense, real world. More housing, I think sometimes, some people speak against any housing, if people are against it, because then say crime will go up. I don't know, I can say because more houses get put in, crime goes up. I don't necessarily believe that either. But I think in general, you just are increasing your population. So whenever you increase your population, there's going to be more of a demand on the police. But I say that very generally. I don't know the specifics. And I've been asked that sometimes in those planning stages. They'd be like, well, if we allow this many units, do you need this number of cops? I don't know if I could say that in fairness. I'm kind of a straight shooter, but I do think if you increase over years and your population grows, we were, by 3,000-4,000, and that's a 10-12% growth. I do think you have to say, well, how did that impact, your calls for service? Did they go up 10-12% or 8%, 15%? You got to kind of keep monitoring it and then assess, I think.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer, because it's been asked a lot, and you've been asked it seems like more than once, so thank you, just for clarity. Macy?
Will that increase traffic, though? Because when you have an increase of homes and increase of people in the town, will that impact the police department's ability to be there to patrol traffic and respond to potential traffic accidents? I think everyone here agrees with me that traffic in Milton is pretty tough. It's pretty tough, and there's, especially during certain times of the day. And now that we have an increase of dwellings in town, that would mean increase of cars. So would that impact your ability?
I think it does impact traffic, yeah. But again, I think where specifically the housing is, and how much of it. MBTA is probably different analysis than talking, the 40B on Randolph Ave, and if Canton Ave happens, the ice house on the Parkway. I mean, on those, you might end a few hundred cars a day, but a road like, reach their roads getting 20,000 a day. So percentage-wise, it's probably not a huge impact. Do you know what I mean? So I think it impacts it. I don't think it's drastic. An MBTA is a little bit different because that's still unclear what, how many units would actually get developed and stuff like that. But the 40Bs, the Ice House, I think yes, but I don't think it's huge because I think just you got to think of the number of cars already in town. Like we're just such a cut-through town, border in Boston. It's just where we are. Like, if we were a similar like Hingham, like and you're surrounded by Cohasset and you just don't have this cut-through. Like we have so much cut-through just being by Boston, the highways. I think there's so many tens of thousands of cars a day anyhow. If you added 500 to 1,000, I don't think it's a big impact, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I forgot the name, the one for, how like when you're kind of turning, after you leave Brugger's, that turn, it's kind of like the highways there.
Oh yeah, the old pass, yeah.
Yeah, the only accident I've ever had was kind of driving through and then, like the other cars coming through from that Quincy side. I'm always curious if we ever like looked at that because I know sometimes accidents tend to happen there more often than.
They happen there. We've discussed it. They've never recommended a change, but that has come up at the Traffic Commission. I sit on the Traffic Commission with, town engineer, DPW, stuff like that. And we've talked about should they, reverse the yield signs there and things like that. They've talked about it, but the engineers and, I do greatly defer. People ask me a lot of the police, but I feel that's more of a traffic engineer question, like the design. They have looked at it to answer your question, but they've never recommended a change. They just didn't feel there was maybe a better solution when we did look at it.
All right, anybody else have any other questions? Chief King?
Oh, great job.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chief.
For your time.
Thanks for your service.
Everything that your
Thank you
department
guys,
does.
believe me, being on the warrant committee is a bigger service than I do. Credit you guys.
Chief, thank you so much, and we appreciate just articulating what the department needs, and we think those are some pretty important needs.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Stay safe.
Thanks, Chief.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Are we passing that around?
Yeah, what do you want?
I'll have the kickouts.
Maybe not.
No man's land.
Either like these.
Does anybody have anything they want to discuss just concerning the police?
Yeah, how do we get an IT guy
I know.
Yeah.
Terrible.
to the police department? Seriously.
He had
Body
mentioned
cams,
this.
cameras at work, I mean.
He had mentioned that previously, and just for like my work, I feel like that's all I do is burn discs, burn thumb drives. And I ask, we ask all of this of the police departments, and you have to work with. So when he's talking, my mind's spinning because I can't imagine how they're getting that done over there without a guy other agencies can call or a person just to kind of help facilitate some of these things. And he's spoken of it before, and I know generally the IT position in town is pretty tough.
Yeah.
Generally, just over for everyone.
It definitely needs to be specialized, as you mentioned. It can't just be an ordinary IT person. I'm just thinking based on my own experience, usually when I have things, digital evidence downloaded, it's very specialized. It's not just an IT person making sure things are connected. It's knowing the data, it's knowing the software, especially when you're extracting cell phones. It's a very complicated process to break into a cell phone, especially when it's an Apple. An Apple is the worst. BlackBerries, which they're obsolete now, but I think there's still a few, those are very, very, very protected. And it requires a specialized background and skill. And so it's not just an IT person, it's someone who has knowledge of police software, the technologies that's utilized by criminals, and then downloading it, protecting it, possibly redacting it if there's minors on it. Because I've had situations where there are minors shown, you gotta black it out. You can't just produce it. So it's not just sharing an IT person in town. It's someone who has to be trained and able to do that type of work. And be able to testify, that's another thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of person who's extracting a telephone or downloading data has to have the ability to take the stand and testify. And I don't think a lot of IT people want to do that. So somebody has to have that background too, the ability to testify to the evidence that was presented digitally. So,
So
Yeah.
now that we've seen what I think we all probably agree is what we need, what's the next step? I mean, does the chief have to put in the IT person?
I think he did, right?
He did put it
he
in,
did put it in.
in his needs base.
Yeah.
In his needs base, but
So who gets to decide whether or not that person gets approved?
the town meeting,
The town meeting?
It's 90,000 a year is what he had said.
which seems pretty reasonable.
Very reasonable, right?
And that's something I think if in our further discussions and, I know we've advocated for the department in the past. It's a very important department we have here in town. We could obviously, if the Warrant Committee thought it was appropriate, we could recommend that the town take a hard look at allocating $100,000 for an IT person for the department. Even like the chief said and Jay brought up, figuring something out to get them somebody there dedicated to help out the officers, I think would be phenomenal.
You think about it, they made the business case, right? You brought up some amazing points.
Right.
What's the cost of not having that person? Lost cases, the legal fees going into all that, time out of the field, all that stuff, versus having that person who could help you mitigate risk and cost to the town.
Yeah, I don't know if he could quantify that. I hate to ask him for more work, but if he could, I'm not asking him for more work, but it'd be great to see, actual numbers for how much that person would save us, even if it's half their salary.
Well, he
even if it's not all their
see
salary.
the number of cases they've had,
Right.
where they've cost for legal fees.
Right.
If they had evidence, they could look at forensic evidence to see how much they had there, which this person can also help to do.
Or 1983 cases,
Yeah.
which is, police brutality cases.
Okay.
So if you don't have a body cam and the person said there's police brutality, excessive force, but you can't refute that, then that's a problem. So if you're able to refute that, that would save on litigation.
Would it reduce our insurance?
Oh, yeah,
Yes, I would-
litigation for
I would
sure.
think it would.
Definitely. And then not only just quantifying the amount, but I'm just thinking as a parent, if my daughter was receiving sex texts, right? I mean, she's 21 now, but back in middle school, let's start in middle school. As a parent, I would want an immediate response to that. An immediate response. And if you're unable to do that, then you're not serving the community, which is us, as best as he would want. So just as a public safety issue too, as opposed to mitigating litigation costs, being able to prosecute cases well, it's also a public safety issue, I think. I would think parents would, if confronted with such an issue, would want an immediate response.
Yeah.
To that issue. And if you can't because we don't have an IT person, then you have to go to state police or some other law enforcement agency, it may not be prioritized. So whereas in Milton in-house, it's a priority here, as it should be.
Yeah, there's so much crime where they can be utilized. You think about the ransom cases that are out there, all the cyber. You get a text once a week now from someone saying you got to pay your Easy Pass, and you're like, what?
Blocking them.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Tom?
So yeah.
Julia has her hand up. Julia.
So, isn't this all a moot point? Because isn't this what we just went through with, the select board has chose not to put a higher number on the ballot that would have accommodated some of the needs-based budgeting. So, yes, for future years, we can think about how we could advocate on behalf of the police department, but isn't that not an option this year anyway, based on that it's just level service budget across all departments?
Yeah, Julia, it does seem that way. It is a good point. There's always an ability to move money. We've seen town meeting attempt to move money. I think it's important maybe as the committee though to flag that issue because I think it's important. Not, and I think, Julia, maybe, you are right at the end of the day. It might be something, frankly, we can't do. And I don't see that override number moving at all.
But Tom, how about flagging it in the comment?
Well, yeah, like
Say,
we could flag
Warrant
it.
committee, recommends based on X.
Yeah, that's what, and we've done
We're
that.
memorialized.
We've done
for it,
that
right?
previously, just in comments like, the Warrant Committee cautions,
Yeah.
or the Warrant Committee would like to flag, this could be like with our PEG access. Town, just think about it. Like, this may dry up and we want to continue with this. So just in the future, please, like, consider this moving forward. The police department I'm seeing the modernization of our fire department, right?
Right.
And the police department should be moving in that way too. Maybe not with the brand new shiny building, but I think with modernizing the way we investigate crime in the town and public order and just helping the community out, I think is just a good idea. But to Julia's point, at least in this time, it could very well be moot.
I don't think we should give up just yet, especially when you have money put aside for all this equipment, but they can't purchase it because we don't have an IT person. It's got to be frustrating.
Crazy.
We also have Ron and Allison afterwards.
Oh, okay, Jay, Ron, and Allison.
Okay, I'm just wondering if for all of our comments, for all of the budget items, we should be noting, here's needs that weren't fulfilled. And I think we do that every year, but really hammer home this year. I mean, I wish Andrew was here. I don't know if he talked to you, Aman, about the IT department, that he was horrified at how understaffed and overworked they are. And, we could go on and on. So that's all. Next person.
I appreciate it, Jay. Ron?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I didn't hear if we talked this, but my Wi-Fi went down for a minute. Did the chief get to talk about the implications if we don't see override, and if his department has to take cuts?
Well, do you want to answer? I was going to ask him that. The reason I didn't ask him that is because Nick Milano, when was he here? It seems like a week ago. He said, I asked Nick at that meeting, do you know which cuts the town will have if the override does not pass? Nick said, no, I don't know. I'll be presenting it to the select board sometime soon. So I did not ask the police chief that because I didn't want to put him on the spot of his boss has not yet said what the cuts will be. I thought of saying, well, imagine the cuts are this. What do you think? And so that's why I didn't ask him that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Would it, just to, not to interrupt, but to follow on that, would it just not be, he's without the needs, he's 1.8% increase in his over last year. So it's below 2.5, so would they just not keep him at that?
And
I would think.
Well, we don't know, but keep in mind that $3 million of the increase from last year is health insurance, and you can't not do that. You got to cut other places.
Right.
We don't know what those other places will be. It might involve the police department, it might not.
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah,
what.
I thought Nick's,
What's up, Ron?
I thought Nick's summary last week said that the departments would have to cut. You'd have to find $1 million from the various departments. I thought there was some number like that. That's what he was going to come back and report to the select board where he would find that reduced spend. And I guess he has to circle back with each of the department heads.
Ron, I'm not saying that's incorrect.
I just can't remember it now.
Do you know? What was the question?
It was Nick's gonna have to find $1 million. The town administrator needs to find $1 million.
That was for the schools.
700 for the 883 for the schools. Yep.
That was the schools.
Okay. Allison, well, thank you so much, and you can ask your question or say whatever you want to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That they didn't see a big increase between 2023, 24, and anything that they did for police, he budgeted, which I was really impressed with last year, being that any funding he received from COVID, he was ahead of it, which I just thought that was kudos to him. And I just wanted to point out too, which I thought was very interesting, just his viewpoint on expansion and looking at every possible avenue to save this town as much as possible. So whether it was modulars, you know, he wasn't talking about millions, he was talking about a couple 100,000, which I just think is just a big testament to how thoughtful and, you know, conscious he is of the budgets. So I just thought that was interesting to point out, and his ability to look at it long-term, budget-wise, what's best interest, and not put himself out of his means. So I think that was important to note. But any of that money that he did receive for funding, he was ahead of it a year last year. And I don't know if people remember, and the year before, I was being three-year member. So just thinking about that long-term and just being a great example to the town of how he's looking at, because if you're going to add on to the police department, he's looking at all the options to what would be most cost effective. So yeah, I think that's important to know when we're talking about budgets and overrides and amounts, because I don't think anything would be drastic for them, because he's been living amongst what they can. And of course they have needs and wants, and obviously they need that IT person drastically, because as he said, that person they were able to see on the light video. So I mean, those things are important for us, especially as a safety. I do think we have a safety issue, and any additional would be supportive. I mean, I've been looking, I meant to ask about a crossing guard for Central, because we have a lot of speeding going on. I'd like to put something there too, but you know, I will have to email him separate, but you know, thinking long-term. But yeah, I think he's a great example to the town for what he's doing and how he's doing it.
Thanks, Allison. One thing is that I would like to mention, kind of just moving off Alice, the previous conversation, was the traffic cameras. Now, was I correct? 75% are
Yeah.
inoperable
That's what he said.
in town? Don't want that getting out.
But which ones?
It's been down for 3 years, he said, right? Some of them have been down for 3 years. That's what I have in my notes.
I was thinking
So it
about,
goes through the equipment, really. Like, we got this great equipment. We
well,
just
think
can't
about the light by Brugger's. That was millions of dollars for those lights that are there, right? And that's.
Is that the one on Bassett? Is the
Yeah.
right by Bruegger's,
Yeah,
right?
right
Yeah,
on the
okay,
corner.
yeah.
Cross.
Think about that. That's those supposed to be smart lights, right? Where they learn the traffic pattern and adjusted. So I mean, my goodness, it's a lot of risk to the town.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so,
well, looks like
Peter, do you have any?
No, this is a little depressing for me, actually.
Yeah?
We've got, you know, a real need that should be met, and we can't find $90,000 somewhere, even in a budget that isn't overridden, to do something that makes the town safer,
In the name of public safety.
and just a public safety issue. There's something wrong.
No.
Again, I'm sorry.
No,
New
Peter,
kid in town, but.
No,
still,
Peter, I-
This is not,
health
this
and
is
public
not right.
safety are always number one,
Yeah, it
right?
should
Should
be.
be, 'cause
Yeah.
you don't have that.
$90,000? What if a concerned citizen wrote a check for $90,000 and gave it to the police? Would that be something that would, I mean, I'm sure there's all kinds of legalities and there's all.
Oh, no, well, sometimes in this town, people try to donate money and we turn it away.
Yeah,
But I think the concern with that would be, Peter, I'm sure it would be welcome with open arms, but they would say, okay, what about fiscal 27?
Yeah.
Fiscal 28, fiscal 28.
so it's an annuity.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing, and you know, I ever since I came on the committee, I kind of look at these numbers now, and I say the same thing. It's like 90,000. Why can't we find
Right.
that?
And again, you know, I'm sorry,
No, I just finished.
just as a follow-up. There's friends of the school, there's friends of the library, there's friends of the cemetery, I guess. You know, are there friends of the police that could basically just raise money for the police department?
They have a benevolent
Yeah,
society.
there's benevolence.
But it's
society.
usually
No,
for,
that's
yeah,
for-
yeah,
that's
that's
for-
for, yeah,
yeah,
widow,
that's-
yeah.
And the fire department does the same thing.
Great call up.
You know, I mean, for capital improvement. and-
That's a great idea.
I do find it frustrating that there's a $9.5 million override, but we can't find $100,000.
Yeah, especially from somebody who's managing, as we just said, and as Allison has just commented on, that is managing their budget and that is looking to save the town money and do that, and to the expense of his own department. I mean, it just,
Yeah, it's an amazing call out by Allison and
No.
you.
yeah.
That his department has stayed when the money's allocated, and there are others we've had challenges with, so it's frustrating.
Hey, Ron?
So I agree with everything you guys are saying. It seems really scary. I have faith that there must be something else that we're missing. And I would ask, when we talk to Nick, he is the boss, right? He's the town administrator. I would hope he has some type of a plan, that at least there's some support. So I don't think, that the plan is to say the police department are totally on their own and they're never gonna get IT help, right? I don't think it's that dire. I do think it's bad, but I think Nick would know better before we start assuming that all this is gonna fall down and the whole town will crumble. I mean, he's running this town. He should have some plan. And I think I would push it on him to say, how is he making that management decision where he's, determining that the 90,000 is better spent somewhere else?
Yeah, good point,
good
Ron.
question
That's
to
a great question to ask, Ron. Jay?
Phrased another way, none of the departments are getting the needs that I understand. So if you were to say, we scraped together enough to hire one employee, DPW wants, I'm just imagining, DPW wants people, fire wants people, library wants people, police want people, schools, of course, want people. If we could hire one more person, would that one person be this person, IT person IT at the town needs people? If we were to hire one more person, would it be the IT person at police? And maybe the answer is yes, but you want to look at all of those and say, is this the number one person or not? Otherwise, you've got every department who has needs that's not getting funded through this override.
Ramon?
I was going to say, I don't know if any of you are familiar with like software as a service, like a lot of these SAS like companies. I was like curious if they've like looked at alternatives besides like hiring, because there's some cool tools out there that you can actually deploy like AI agents that can pretty much be able to kind of like do some of the tedious work. And I was kind of curious if they've kind of looked into those alternatives, seeing that if staffing is a problem, because I've used like personally AI agents, like for example, trying to be able to say, if you're giving it instructions, do this. So I'm kind of curious as far as like sophistication, whether they've kind of like looked into that category. Maybe I can kind of sit down, see something.
Yeah, you can ask Nick, certainly. I think that would be a good question. As the technology and software advances, especially in law enforcement, I think, there are a lot of tools out there that they can use. They're very expensive, usually.
Depends, but I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure
but
it's
it
not
also
going to cost like
depends.
$90,000 a year.
I want to respond to that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, just based on my experience, if you're using software and you're going to use it as evidence, it has to be substantiated, it has to be credible, and you need someone to testify to it. So if you're using AI, who is going to be the witness? Who would I list on my notice of witnesses? I don't know who I would list. And if it's a company, then you're going to be paying for someone, flying out to your trial, and billing you for an hour. This is based on experience too. So the bottom line is, if you have someone in-house, it is far better for evidentiary purpose to have that than to engage in software with a company. And then you run into procurement issues because we are a municipality and we have procurement laws that we have to follow as a state. So I'm just saying that, just to counter that, that's just based on my experience as a former prosecutor for 2 decades, that I would not want that.
Yeah. But I think it's a good question to ask.
But it's a good question to ask Nick, though.
I was
but
thinking
not
this
for
though.
police.
So say for example, if like some of the officers, I'm sure that there's kind of like a level of training you have to do for an officer. Maybe there could be something, since how Steve was mentioning how like cybercrime is becoming much more bigger, and I do believe it's probably going to require police officers to be more cognizant. So I would think that maybe they can have a certain level of training, and if obviously it's going to be dispersed as far as responsibility, if like say similar to just doing a shift, where they can probably like look at like what kind of knowledge they can focus on. Someone's going to focus here with
the tech side of it. So that's why if they're like right now seeing if there's alternatives to just, hiring someone for 90,000 a year.
I think it's a fair question to ask. I
Yeah,
think it's a good
definitely.
question. Anybody have any other thoughts just regarding the police budget or just other departmental requests? How small they are?
I just.
Yeah.
About the technology.
Oh, Ron, you're breaking up your microphone.
I think the tricky part is you need someone who's technically savvy to help make those decisions.
Ron, your
Oh, sorry.
microphone. Yeah.
You need the IT person to help.
Yeah.
Purchase
8:30. It's overtime.
Warrant committee needs another IT person.
Ron, just raise your hand when you want to speak again. I'll make sure we call on you.
I'm all set, thank you.
Do you want to say what you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just thinking, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can. It's perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I think technology sounds great, but I think you still need a person to help make the right call on what technology to invest in. And I think I think you can't say, let the technology decide what technology works best. I think you still need someone tech savvy.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else about the PD?
After this is done, I was going to show you, because I did create the video, based on the last meeting.
For what?
I actually took all the notes and everything, and then I put it in, and it generated it into a visual, explaining. So if we ever, presenting maybe to the planning board or the select board, I think I pretty much created it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, so Aman did some notes for the meeting, and he used an AI tool just to put them together. Can you just send
The last one,
the
yeah.
last one? Can you just send it to me, and then
Sure.
we can distribute them and everything?
Yeah, that could work.
I really appreciate that. Does any of you have anything else you want to discuss with it? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The chief does a good job, and I know when I signed the things last year, he had money left over, so he does a good job. But okay, I guess kind of open it up. Just any general business. I'd like to mention there was a school committee meeting last night. I was talking with Steve during the course of the meeting. Steve did some great notes, like Aman did, I believe, for the last one. I distributed them from Steve, so just take a look at them. The last half of the meeting they spent on the budget. It would be nice if Lori was here, but I know the capital committee, they were talking about Chromebook, reallocation of the Chromebook money out of capital to schools, which was not voted on positively at the capital meeting, so that did not go through. So the school is still looking at about an $300,000 deficit. So it's 883 and change. The chair of the school committee and I have kind of been playing phone tag. We're going to be speaking tomorrow. They met last night. Their next meeting is Monday, and according to the chair, they're thinking they may have a number ready to recommend for their budget. And I can't speak to that number. I think that it may be, they haven't handled in terms of their cuts, they haven't cut that money, or they haven't cut positions, or have found a way to kind of get back up and be level. So they're still looking at 883 plus as a deficit. So they're going to come forward hopefully Monday or the following day with a number. And I don't know if it's going to be a number greater than what the select board is looking at, or the same, or so there's just a lot of questions as to the school budget, and we're just waiting hopefully for next week where they'll have that number in place.
So I'm clear, they're saying for fiscal year '25, 883 over.
Correct.
budget.
Correct.
Correct.
So, which will translate into 26 also probably being
Correct.
over on that.
Correct.
Wait, what was that second part?
It'll translate to fiscal year 26 being 883 over 2 probably, I would suspect.
You're going to ask for more money to offset
not-
that.
That's not what I've understood. I've understood from Lori and mostly secondhand that somebody on the school subcommittee, correct me if I'm wrong, but that Katie has said, oh, I see where we're short in the FY25. I'm not letting us be short there in FY26. FY26 is solid.
FY26 has an $883,000 deficit.
FY20 next year. This year.
This year, 25.
25 has an 883.
Which will go to.
But next year, what they've asked for will cover what they need according to.
Right. But they're asking for more money next year to cover this year. So
Deficit.
imagine your credit
Okay,
card.
that may be what I'm missing.
That is
Is
what's
that what
happening.
came out on
Yeah.
the last meeting?
Yeah, so your
Thank
credit
you.
card is maxed out, and they're asking Dad for more money, is what's happening. They want to go above and beyond that. 883 is going to roll forward. That's what they're asking
I was
for.
just, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
is The 1 million in free cash, I don't know what that means.
They were looking, I
They
mean,
know what it means.
it's a very good
I'm
question.
not trying to throw shade.
No,
I'm
no,
just-
no, no, no.
no,
They're, Jay, to be fair, they're trying to sort it out, right?
Okay.
And they ran the numbers if they were to eliminate a set number of positions. And what they came back with, the finance subcommittee, was that cost of unpaid vacation, sick leave, unemployment insurance, stuff like it, the town would net out at like $83,000 at the end. They're not really going to save any money. So Burroughs is not recommending any cuts to the end of the school year.
Yeah.
That's what's happening there. And so they were asked Monday morning before or Wednesday morning before a finance meeting to cut another 700, and they didn't just find it someplace. So, I mean, I sat through that meeting last night. I think a few people did until about 11:30. I didn't hear where they're going to hunt for that. I think they're going to ask for more money to offset that. So it's going to be interesting. They have no meetings on the books until Monday. So I'm hoping that they're working independently on their homework because we're running out of time. And I mean, there's a lot of decisions that got to be made. And there's some key bullet points that happened towards the end, talking about, trust from the community. These are people's careers that are impacted. There are students that are talking about that are impacted. There's a lot of things that they're weighing heavy on the community and all of us, to be honest with you. And it's really hard, I think.
Judy has her hand
Judy.
To piggyback on Steve in a way, I was reading an article in the Brookline News where they're in a similar situation of not being able to close out their budget for the year. And they spent a considerable amount of time trying to address that. And one of the things that they actually did vote on was consolidating departments that would be an independent department, and now they're consolidated with another department. So they're doing two things at once. But they feel as though that will work. And so, Steve, if I could ask you, as you watch the meeting, were they trying to do this, something similar here in our town?
Would they, or did they discuss it?
Did they discuss it? And if they didn't, I guess the question would go, excuse me, to you. Why do you feel they would not? I know that's a loaded question.
I didn't hear any of that. What I heard is there are some leads that have, subbed in as teachers. They looked at, there's, in some of the notes there, you'll see they talk about large group sub coverage. But they didn't get into what you're saying. I think, Jay, you might have actually talked about that one, or Allison might have talked about consolidation at one point. I haven't heard that.
It wasn't discussed last night.
I didn't hear it last night at all. It's a good question, though, and a great idea.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, Judy.
In
Can you speak up a little bit?
looking at all of this Brookline, what they're trying to do, does anyone here know if there was talk in Brookline of their custodial staff and sort of contracting some of that out to save money, not entirely. Are we hearing anything like that? And in our town, do we use only custodial or from consolidated facilities?
See, I didn't hear anything about that last evening.
Okay.
I don't want to speak to the janitorial staff in Milton, but I think those are all in-house school department positions.
Okay, thank you.
I believe they are. I don't think they're hired
yeah.
out. And I just say that from my experience with athletics and people opening the certain gates at certain parks in the morning for us, and they're town staff. So I can be corrected on that, but if they're not contracted.
Right, and in noting the Brookline case, this was a hard thing for them to do. It wasn't their school committee. The vote was 5-4, 5 being saying to consolidate, and 4. It was a tough decision, but one they felt they needed to make for the benefit of the budget, and that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in there, Judy, around that at all.
All right, thank you, Steve, and everyone.
No
Yeah, there was discussion about they provided some examples of things they could cut, and I know that each school committee member, not every school committee member, but the school committee kind of opined on it. You know, some of the things were like having a substitute in the auditorium during free periods. You know, like, you know, they're really getting into the weeds on their budget, and these are like $26,000 line items that they're looking at. 24,000. Thanks. Yeah. So I mean, they're really, you know, they're really looking at everything to cut. But you know, when you look at the list, they're all redlined because, you know, they don't want to get rid of them. And I understand why. You know, some of them have excellent programs, but you know, they're really looking, they're really trying, and they just haven't come up with anything yet.
I'm still hung up on the mechanics, and I apologize that I haven't listened to the meeting, but the biggest problem it seems they're facing is bills they have to pay between now and July 1st. And we've got a couple million in free cash sitting around. I don't even know, is the town able, you know, forget for a second if the town wants to or if it's a good idea. Is the town able to use that free cash for expenses right now? Would we need the Maytown meeting to vote for that? I don't even know how it mechanically would work. I remember a year or two ago, the town said, we know we're earning more in investment income, so we're gonna bibbity bobbity boo have that for, you know, more revenue for this year, and then we can spend it. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out mechanically how it would work.
So Katie's looking at a structural deficit. The costs that they have are outweighing the budget substantially. So, for example, they had a budget expenditure for one of the line items. They had budgeted 1.438. The actual cost was over 2 million. The variance was 568. So there's other variances in there of 519, 323. So this is all utilities, right? So that's where they're getting hit. On substitutes, they also had substantial variances as well that they didn't predict. So yes, that's why they have that, Jay. So the budget they've been rolling has been based off not actual costs on top. It's been just flat, whatever it is. So this is what's happening.
I did hear that part of the meeting, and it sounds like she's saying the FY26 budget covers that. The FY26 budget they proposed will cover those things you just mentioned and everything else. It's the FY25 that wasn't set up to cover that is why we're...
She says something to the tune, I have to look back at, we're hoping to establish a best practice moving forward in '26, where we actually have our budget based off the true cost.
The actuals.
So you said that utilities went from 1.5 million to 2 million? Is that what you just said? $500,000, 30% increase?
Yeah, yep.
So.
Happened the year before too. So I'll give you 23, FY '23. They budgeted 1.475. It came in at 1.1799, variance of 323. FY '24, they budgeted 1.385, came in at 1.904, variance of 519,000. FY '25 projected, it's not done yet. 1.4 was the budget, 1.43. Expenditure was over 2. Variance was 568. So you
just misbudgeting.
We've had mild winters.
So it's not actual over actual.
Utilities haven't gone up that much.
Yeah, but this is the coldest winter we've had in like 3 years, 4 years. So where's that coming from? Was there a breakdown of what the utilities, like electricity, I mean?
No,
they bundled it. They bundled the heat, light, water.
So that's what I'm wondering,
Can
because
I
I know
add something
heat.
too?
Sure, Allison.
They're also not, these schools are open on the weekends. There's no lights that turn off. Like, they haven't updated their technology to be efficient. And that's what I noticed too in these discussions, that they have schools that the lights are on all weekend.
Oh.
And so I am concerned about kind of the practices, that the schools have in regards to not only how they budget, but like monitoring and assessing and evaluating, so these little things add up. If no one's turning off the lights all weekend for schools that aren't being used, I mean, it's going to add up. So I don't think it's inflated that much, but I do think that these best practices haven't been instilled in the schools, that aren't being used.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
I completely agree.
Yeah, it's not energy
I've
efficient.
looked at the power bills for the high school and seen the same thing that Allison's saying.
Yeah, so what do you with your fine eye?
Yeah, I looked at the power bills and they differentiate between the power that's used, call it peak, which think of that as 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I think, and off peak, nights and weekends. And they're using as much per hour in the high school off peak as peak. And I asked about that, and the response I got was, well, it's used in the evenings and it's used on the weekends. But that's during the school year. In the summer, it's even weirder. In the summer, which is it? I think off-peak is still high, but peak goes down. So my only conclusion was, again, full disclosure, I work for Eversource. My only conclusion is call Mass Save, call Eversource, and have them come do an audit and figure out where your thing is going and fix that up.
So on average, over the last 3 fiscal years in utilities, heat, light, water, their variance is 470,000, 467 on average. We're under scope in our budget. That's a big miss.
Yeah, Julia.
Just to be clear, Katie has said that one of the major structural deficiencies that she has identified is that for I don't know how many years, but it sounds like many, the budgets were being based on the previous year's budgets, not actuals. So that's one of the major, contributes to how we got here, is that, and why you see some of those same numbers year after year, despite the actuals being totally different. So that is one of the things she has fixed in the process moving forward and for FY26.
FY26 still is going to have a deficit. And as they spoke earlier, they want to use the money from 26 to apply it to 25. So if we think that this isn't going to be an issue, we're at a deficit each year. They haven't closed that deficit because you would have to budget the money to be able to close that. So, I mean, long term, unless we start living amongst our means, and as they were saying, they're planning on using free cash that's going to be for FY26, we're going to be back here in 2 years unless we figure out exactly and assess and evaluate what we can have, even if we do pass the override, which now will need to be, as they said, they're gonna need to go back for another million. So, I mean, I think the reality is that, as they spoke, we're here because of years of using free cash, not budgeting for positions, not assessing these positions, and I've said this numerous times, and evaluating so that we know, and then also obviously the increase of sped, but that's not the only reason why. We've dipped in and we've increased the substitute salary that never was adjusted. You know, this is the problem with what we've done. Our previous practice is that we've approved positions and we haven't budgeted for them. We've increased salaries. We didn't budget for them. Substitute teachers, yeah, that sounds great, but we never applied what that cost would now be. So now we're in a position where we don't have substitutes and kids are gonna go into, you know, a auditorium. And when we talk about learning loss and we talk about all these things that are important to us, overcrowding, we're willing to sacrifice kids a period of learning with 50 kids with one teacher. And that's, you know, unacceptable. So, you know, going forward, yes, I think, you know, Katie's doing a great job, but if Katie leaves, where does that put us? We need better practices, better budgeting, more involvement from communities. School committee needs to be responsible. We have budget finance people, chairs that were in these positions that allowed this, you know, they signed off. And people want to put Nick Milano, you know, as the town administrator. Those people were, you know, signed off on these budgets. And that was never, we were in a deficit in March 2023, knowing that we were giving the town a full needs-based budget using free cash. And we were going to need an override for 2024. So I think going forward, you know, they're using the actuals, but we're going to need to do some, even for 2026, they're going to have to evaluate positions if we, you know, get through this and say, like, the amount of money incoming, even if we put money into stabilization for special education, we're going to need to evaluate and say, is this going to be enough? Because you can't use free cash to fund positions. It's not good, it doesn't work in the budget.
Macy?
I applaud what Allison's saying, and it makes me wonder whether we can even trust their budget. So what they propose, is it really what they need? Are they going to come back and ask for more? It makes me just second guess it.
Well, you know, Julia
Concerning.
and Allison said, and I've seen this, and I don't know if any other member of the subcommittee, you know, Allison, Julia spoke to it. I see renewed hope in Katie, the CF. I see, you know, she's pointing things out and addressing, like, you know, some of the slides in her presentation last night were, as they were the previous meeting, very enlightening. So I think, like, they look like they're recognizing the issue, and she's grabbing a hold of it. It's just how much are they going to let her grab a hold of it and pin it down, you know? And I think that was the big question that kind of rolls around in my head, because she's asking tough questions, she's giving them tough data, and she's telling it. So I have greater trust myself as, you know, Tom Caldwell looking at it, but I guess the proof is in how does this roll out in the future, and, you know, what do they allow her to do?
Well, I think Katie will absolutely put together a plan that is actionable and that works. It's a question of whether, to your point, whether they accept it or whether, you know, it's, you know, 6 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, right? I mean, take some of the stuff out.
Yeah, I share your concern.
Brian?
Well, two questions, but do we know when they're coming in front of us, or that's the question?
No, that's what I'm trying to figure that out, and I think I have hope because of the representations the chair made that they might have something on Monday, but, you know, I don't know. I feel bad because I don't have the information to share with you, and
Yeah, so what I'd like to know, like, what I'd like to see is something that would show, like, maybe, I was gonna say 24, but maybe going back to even to 23, 24, 25 actuals, and then, well, we don't have all of 25 actuals, but we have projections, and maybe 26 budget, and just see what is causing the big jump in increases, the actual expenses. Not taken from free cash or anything like that, but the actual, what they actually spent, like what they actually spent on utilities each year.
Can we do that?
In being able to, something that would make up like 80, because if you look at the budget from 24 to 26, what they're budgeting for 26, or what they did budget for 26, which is probably gonna change, it was like a $12 million increase. Like, what is that? Like, what makes up 80% of that, or something? You know, we should have some, definitely from them on that, so we kind of have a.
Well, salaries make up 80% of the budget.
Yeah, I think a lot
What
of
is it, head count then? But that's what I'd like to see too, is the head count, but is it, it's not an increase in wages.
Well, I think, Steve, you want to make that?
Yeah, I think that, Allison, right, check me on this one. They added, what, 70 positions with ARPA? 79 with ARPA funding.
In 5 years.
So, 79. And
79
so
positions.
one of the things I heard in the meeting on Wednesday was some of these positions, you know, the allocation where their costs would land, right? What department, right? So that's challenge too. So I get sorting that out would be a big deal. And many towns used ARPA money similarly, right? So that we're not alone like that. But how do we account for that now? What do we do with those now? Now we have that operating cost.
Yeah, baked in. Were those teaching positions, or were they other?
I think they were a mix.
It was a mix.
Yeah,
So you had administration, you had preschool coordinators, you had a variety of teachers. The problem is that when we used the money, the plan was to go for an override a couple of years ago. And so that now we're in this deficit of 80 some odd plus positions, and they couldn't say no. And that was the problem, because it seemed like we could appear to afford it. But eventually, when we saw last year it running out of grant funding and free cash, and then you add all these other expenses of benefits and various others. Last year in March, I said there was going to be over a $4 million deficit. And we were going into this. We knew this was coming. So this has been dating back to, the money from COVID. And so it's hard to understand, the problem is, what people want to put certain blame on certain things, but, there is much awareness that we were overspending and we were basically putting it on, in the hopes that we would get an override last year, but we didn't have enough support and drive and advocacy. And there was some miraculous balanced budget, but even when Nick came here in March, he said that there was a deficit. So going into 2024, 25. So I don't, and so now we're here. And so the problem is that there wasn't any, when we knew about it in July, there should have been decisions made in September to make some adjustments. And that wasn't done. So and that's why now it's too late. So if you listen to the school committee meeting last night, they said it's pointless to go for $24,000 for the kids to sit in an auditorium. You might as well ask the select board for the whole thing. Because now the money is just, it's not going to put a dent in it at all.
But the actual, how much, so it's okay, never mind, I missed that. Well, half of it, how much of the 80 positions, of the 79 positions that increased, how much was that, the 12 million increase, how much was that, was that?
That's a good question, I don't know.
We did challenge salaries last year and the year before. We did see more than a couple percentages go up for a lot of them. That's, if Lori was here, we would sit in budget meetings last year and see drastic increases. And positions where they would receive stipends with no explanation of what the stipends were. You know, so that's, I think, a lot of the concern from many of the trusts in the town is that there is money given, and when they break down the budgets, and, you know, hopefully this changes, but you have professionals, principals receiving stipends, and there's nothing wrong, but nobody knew what they were for. And so it's hard because, you know, from the past 3 years, you give money hoping for certain positions, and there's no, you know, as I've said, you know, interventionist the first year that was supposed to be for COVID wasn't hired. So it's hard to feel faith in learning loss when there was $80,000 for an interventionist that was never hired. Where did that money go? It wasn't saved for the, you know, it wasn't given back. It was put to another position. You know, they can hire people within the year. So, I mean, I think there's gotta, you know, as much as Katie's going to, I think we need, as a town or principals, you know, by school, a better process, an assessment and evaluation, because I've always said that you add. I've never seen any, like, hey, you know, we don't need this. We've actually combined this. You know, that's what, you know, budgeting evolves to, because sometimes you don't need something, sometimes you do. But we need a better system. It's obviously it's not working. But I also think that we need to hold our elected officials more accountable for these decisions, because we can't put it on one person and blame the superintendent, blame whoever, because that's not fair. You know, everybody who signs off on it, just like when we sat in for meetings and asking about salary increases and stuff, you know, everybody needs to hold, you know, a more of a part of it, you know, and not putting any blame on anybody, but now knowing moving forward, you know, and I'm sure that everybody wants to be more involved. So hopefully this is an eye opener.
I'm sorry.
Right, oh yeah.
I had some thoughts on the process too. I only went to one school finance committee meeting, and I just thought there could be improvements in the process or recalibration of how they do things. And I wonder if it would be worth it for the warrant committee to come up with suggestions for them. Is that a thing? Is that?
Yeah, we always suggest things.
Does it go to warrant or?
Yeah, it goes into the warrant. It goes into our comment, and that would be part, you know, of our discussion, Brian. If you wanted to raise that when the schools come in, and we can have the conversation about that, and about, you know, anything after they leave, and we can incorporate it. You know, if we agree as a committee, we can incorporate it into our comment. You know, Katie Blake has several suggestions on how, you know, they can address this, but we can incorporate those, and we can incorporate our own. So we're free to write what we want.
But Allison's right. I mean, people signed off on that budget.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have anything on anything other than schools? Okay. I'm hoping to have some more information for you over the weekend, just about a printed warrant, additional consent agenda articles. I've been in touch with some school people just about the school comment, just getting that started. I know there's a big part of we don't, but we have a lot of historical information. And I know Brian's going to work on the lighting, the planning comments. I'm sorry. Brian, we can talk over the weekend if you would like.
Okay.
But
I just have to make adjustments to the last.
Yeah, just our newer things. And so hopefully I have some news for you soon. I'm hoping to speak to the chair of the school committee tomorrow, try to figure out when they're coming in, and they're going to speak to us.
What do you think we're going to meet next week every day?
I think we're here on Monday for DPW and fire. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the school meeting and read Jay's notes, I suggest you do that, because maybe we can talk about that a little bit more, and some of the things that everyone, you know, Allison, Julia, Peter, everyone's brought up today, Jay, Steve. So DPW and fire, I'm trusting Tuesday and Wednesday we're going to be meeting. I'm hoping to get schools in one of those 2 days.
Since we're-
Does government, and that being said, does the general government committee, do you have anything that you want to show us
We
next
talked
week?
Yeah, we talked amongst ourselves, and I sort of proposed we might be able to take care of things just sort of among ourselves, or maybe
Okay.
sending something written to the warrant committee.
Sure.
I don't know if anything will rise to the level if we need to present to the warrant committee, but that's yet to be determined.
Okay,
So that's where things stand.
awesome.
People have marching orders. So will we have agendas for all next week that are sort of all encompassing, like pretending that every
Yes.
day we're going to do everything?
That's what I'm going to send to Karen.
Okay.
We need to post tomorrow.
Yeah, we have to post tomorrow for Tuesday. That one, I'm going to manipulate that a little bit tonight, Karen, and I'll send it to you. And then there on out, Jay, it's going to be our vote on everything, talk about everything, meetings.
Yeah.
And I just say without the government committee, and I say this just for some of the new members, I know there's some new members on the government, general government committee, is just, those are for like the consent agenda, just kind of get a good idea of where we are, where we're at financially, just for all those other articles. So that is a very fast and furious voting process. So it just kind of gets us, especially the newer members, up to speed on what this article does, why we're doing it, why we need to spend this, why we don't spend that. So that's, I found it helpful my first year to go through that, and just, it was helpful.
So
Jay.
I don't know if we can vote on any budget items until Nick proposes both a with and without override. And he said he wanted to talk to the select board first.
Correct.
Is that this coming Tuesday?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Okay. There was another thing too, planning board. Remember, they have to vote on the amendments or the changes, and then we still have to vote for those. I trust that that's going to happen next week after their next meeting.
When are they meeting with them? Is that Tuesday as well?
Monday, I think. They're meeting on Monday?
Planning board is Monday,
Yeah, Monday they're meeting.
or the select board is not Tuesday at the moment.
Yeah, they're not on the calendar, but they might be
I
going.
think they were going to post. I know planning board, they're going to vote then on Monday. So we can take that up Tuesday. Okay. Okay, I'm around this weekend. If anybody has any questions, you want to reach out, just reach out. Brian, I know maybe we should talk.
Okay.
But please look at the school committee stuff. Take a little time. It's going to help. This is our opportunity to ask them just really good questions. And the benefit is to town meeting and the town in general. So the warrant committee's here, so just take a little time if you can, everybody, and just, I know you all have, but just try to formulate some stuff just so we can get the necessary information from them and have a good conversation.
Okay.
So that's the biggest one. It's what's driving the budget, so, and the override, so. I don't really have anything else I want to talk about. Does anybody have anything they'd like to mention?
Meeting to adjourn.
There's a motion.
Second.
Second, Macy. We are adjourned. Thank you, Warrant Committee. Thank you, Milton.
Thank you.
Would you be able to send me?
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Aman.